All right, so we're back on track, and we're going to do the second part of this comments challenge. And again, we are practicing the acceptance unit test cycle, and we need to learn about the belongs to and has many associations, and which is actually the part that we will be doing now. We set the stage kind of thing. We wrote the initial story, and we have some tests that are passing. We're able to pass in some data, user-generated data from the form in our articles show view to a controller action, and we're trying to create a comment. However, we stumbled upon a problem because we don't have a comments model defined in our application. So at this point, and this is a very important step in our storytelling, we need to abandon the acceptance test level and go down to the unit level, basically. And of course, we write our unit specs in RSpec and not in Cucumber, right? So that's what we need to do at this point. So we're just gonna dispatch Oliver and make sure that Alfred and Lisa joins in. So if you could just stick your head out from the cohort room and call them into the hangout.
Han vill ha er.
Right. All right. So let's move on. So again, we are moving down from the Cucumber and acceptance test level using Cucumber, right now down to RSpec. And since we don't have a comments model, so we're going to create a comments model in our application. And for that, we're going to use a Rails generator, and we're going to generate a model, and the model will be called comment, right? And what do we need in terms of attributes on that model? Well, we need an email, right? And that's going to be a string, and we need a content. That's what we settled for, right? And that's also going to be, well, it can be a text, because strings are of limited value. I think it's 255 characters, but the text could be much longer. So we want to allow the comment to leave a longer comment. But, and this is important, we need an association between the comment and the article, right? We want to have the comment belong to an article. So for that, we can make sure that there is a foreign key of an article created for us in the comments model, and we can do that using the generator by saying article references. We use that data type. We're going to use a reference to an article in our migration. So let's try that and see where we end up. So we run this command, and that generates a migration. It generates a class definition in the models folder. It generates a spec file for us in our spec folder, but it also creates a factory for us in the factories folder, because we have Factory Girl installed. Now, Factory Girl changed name to Factory Bot, but it's generally the same gem still. I just didn't update my gem file. In your newer versions, you probably have Factory Bot and not Factory Girl. But again, it's the same thing. There was I read a blog post about this, and they didn't like the gender reference to in their gem name, so that's why they changed it to bot instead. But it's pretty much the same thing. So once we've run this generator, we want to take a look at what has actually been generated for us. So we go to the migration file, and we find that in the db migrate folder, and we just take a look at that. And what it does, and you recognize this from your previous assignments in Sinatra, where we use Active Record and the other Rails stuff that you've built. It creates a table that is called comment, and it creates an attribute or a column in that table called email and content, and it also adds a foreign key to an article, to the article table, basically, which makes it, gives it a reference. And what else does it? Well, it also adds timestamps to it, which is a standard thing for Rails generated models, right? And the other thing that happened was that it added a factory, and we're going to modify this factory a little bit. So the email is probably we probably want an email to be there, test.com, and then content is just some random comment, something like this. And we set the article to nil in our factory for now. We might want to change it later, but you can set a reference here as well. But for now, we don't have to do anything. So okay, so we at least took a look at the comments factory, and we can have now we can also have a look at the spec for the comment, right? And we have this basic setup of this spec file. We're going to remove this one now, and the scaffolded code, and we're going to start filling that with some specs. Now, if I would to run my Cucumber now, then it would probably be passing, but you have to resist the urge to do that, because we want to make sure. Well, it wouldn't actually be passing yet because I haven't run the migration, and you want to resist the urge to do that. You want to test your model thoroughly before doing anything, right? So we're going to add a describe block here. We want to describe the database first, and we want to use the shoulda matchers. So we're going to say it is expected to have DB column, and what do we want? We want to make sure it has an ID, and we want to make sure that it has 2 more columns, and one is, of course, email, and the second is content, right? That's pretty straightforward, I would say. And so I'm going to run this now, and we will get some failures, of course. Spec, model, and then comment spec. We only want to run the spec that we are working with. That's the smart thing to do. We will get some errors because we haven't run the migration yet. Right. So lots of output, nothing to show for this. So I'm going to just grab this thing that Rails is telling me to do. They are very nice. So they want me to migrate the database, to migrate the rest of it, the development database as well. All right. So let's run this again. And now everything passes for me. Good stuff. That's awesome. And then we want to create another describe block, associations, because we want to say that it is expected to belong to, needs to belong to article, right? We just want to write a test for it. And shoulda matchers allows us to do that really quickly. Without shoulda matchers, this test would probably consist of like 5, 6, 7 lines of code. We just want to make sure that it does. So that's why we use shoulda matchers, right? So we're just going to run this again, and it works. Because why? Well, since we used that article references when we created our migrations, apart from adding the foreign key to the database migration on the database level, it also added this line of code that says belongs to article directly in the class definition for us. Can you see that? Good. So that's okay. There is another piece of code that we want to run to write, or another test that we want to write. And if we take a look at the article spec, we can see here that we had a test to make sure that our factory is valid. And this is a very important test, because as you build up stuff and you add attributes or associations or things like that, the factory will no longer be valid because perhaps you add some validations or some other stuff. And that it's very important that we make sure when we run our specs that the factory is actually a valid factory. It doesn't have much to do with implementation, but for testing purposes, those factories are really important, right? So for our comment spec, we just add another describe block, and I can place it here on top just to follow the same standard that I had in the article spec. Describe factory do, and now we cannot use shoot a matcher, so I'm just going to create a standard it block is valid. And then we just do expect factory girl dot create comment to be valid. Right. So this is a pretty straightforward. We just might want to make sure that when we create a factory bot thing, then it's going to be valid for us, right? So let's see if we can run this again, and it didn't, because the article did not exist.
But the factory girl tests are in the context of validations, right?
No.
Okay.
I just created another describe. Why? No. Why do you think that?
No, but this has to do with validations, right?
No, this is a separate thing. So validations, we have no validations on this. We're just testing the factory, basically.
Okay.
Right. So the problem here is that we have a belong to thing, and a comment needs to be part of it needs to belong to an article. You understand? So, and we're not creating that. So we would need to do something like this. We need to do let article, right? We need to create an article and then say just factory bot create article, right? And then here we want to create the comment, but we want to pass in article to be the article that we just created on line 6, right? But we need to have that article, basically. So now it should pass for us, and it does now, right? Without an article, without being associated with an article, the comments model will not be able to be saved. Does that make sense? I mean, if there is no article, then the comment doesn't make any sense at all, because what would you comment on, right? Okay, so this is passing for us now. We don't have any validations yet, but we can assume, in our modeling, and this could be done now or later, but we can assume that, if there is no, we know that the email is supposed to be optional, right? Right?
Yes.
Right. But if you don't pass in anything to the content, then the comment is like totally irrelevant, right? Why would you send off a comment unless you actually comment on anything? So one could argue that that the content, at least the comment, needs to have some content, right? Right. So let's create another describe block, and we want to test the validations, right? And the reason why I'm splitting everything up in the various describe blocks is for clarity. We don't have to have them. We can test everything in one single describe block. But in my opinion, it's much better to use various describe blocks because it makes it all much easier, I would say, right? So in this validation thing, we can say that it is expected to and to do what? What is it supposed to do? Let's say I don't know. I know, but let's say I don't know. So let's go over to Shooter-Matchers. And take a look at the possible validations or possible tests we can write with Shooter-Matchers, and that can give us a pointer in the right directions. For instance, I can see here real quickly that we have a matcher that is called validate presence off, right? So we can, if we click on this, these guys document their stuff slightly different from many others. So it's like they are giving you an example of a class, and then they show you an example of how you can test it in using Shooter-Matchers, okay? So in this case, this robot class validates presence of arms, right? And then in RSpec, you can write it should validate presence of arms, right? Now, we do not use the should keyword. We use is expected to. That's the only difference here between our way of implementing or using those tests and their way of documenting it. And I think that somewhere here on the documentation, let's see, where was that? Should. Right. Yes, here. Should versus is expected to. Note that in this README and throughout the documentation, we're using should. And you can use that, of course, but if you prefer to use is expected to, you can do that. So, and I prefer is expected to because it follows the RSpec convention. Like RSpec as in itself has moved away from the should keyword. So we are supposed to use is expected to. Is that clear? All right, good. So we can do something like, if we just take a look again, take a look at the validate presence of, we can say it is expected to validate presence of content in our case, right? Okay, so let's do that. It is expected to validate presence of content, right? Right. So let's run this, and it will fail for us probably because we're not validating that yet. Right. Comment did not properly validate that content cannot be empty falsy. Good. And it's very important that we see those tests fail first before we actually make the implementation, because otherwise we just don't know whether our code that we've written has actually has had any impact. So if we go to the comment, and the only thing we have there now is this belongs to, so we can do something like that. Validates content presence true, right? Something like that. Let's try that. And how do we know? Well, we know that because we can run our test and it should go green. And it goes green. That's good. However, a small refactoring could be in place automatically, directly. We can say validates presence off. and then we don't have to add this anymore, right? So it's a different way of doing the same thing. I don't mind which one you do. Now, if we were to validate other presences, right? Like if we would like to validate presence of email, we could do this, right? But we could also do this. Which is shorter, okay? Now, we don't want to validate presence of email, but I just wanted to tell you that you can, you know, pass in many attributes into this validate presence of command, okay? So let's run this again. And it looks good. All right, so we're just gonna do git commit. Adds, well, I'm gonna need to git add everything and git commit IAM adds comment model. Yeah. Right. Like that. All right. Okay. So this means that if I were to run my Cucumber again, we should get a different error message than the one we were giving before, and it's all right. It you know, it actually works. We are past this error message and past this last step where we are redirected back to the Learn Rails 5 page. But the problem we're seeing now is that I should see your comment was added successfully, and there's no such thing there, right? And the reason for that is, of course, because we're not setting a flash, right? We know that we can use flashes to communicate with our application. So how can we do that? Well, we can set a flash here, like flash success equals what was it I was supposed to say? Your comment was added successfully, right? So let's just grab that so I don't make any typos. Something like this, right? And we can run this now. It will still fail for us, probably. Right, and why is that? Well, because we don't display flashes anywhere. If we take a look at the at the layout and the application HTML, there's nowhere here where we actually display anything about flashes, right? So to make things easy for us, we just do, you know, Rails HAML flashes. Flash message in HAML. Good stuff. Let's grab that code. Flash each do key. Right. Right. We can use this. We can use this and modify this. So this is written for what? For some sort of for CSS framework. We don't need that probably. Oh, we haven't even translated this to HAML. Oh, that's even better. Then we just grab this, because this one is written in ERB. So there we go. Flash each key value div class. No, we don't need that for anything because we will not style this yet. We can change that later. And we can remove this button. Of course, that's some bootstrap thing. This looks much better. They're displaying that in strong. Sure, why not? Right, so let's run the test again and see if it works. And it worked. And the next problem is that we're not. Where is that? Did it work actually? Let's have a look at that. I need to see that actually. Yes, it did work. But okay, so I have my show me the page still around. Let's remove that. Right. So let's move this one to once we are back on the, once we have filled stuff in, right? Just to see that it actually works. And this beats, to be honest, this beats adding the, firing up the server. We can see that your comment was added successfully, but we don't have anything about displaying the, we want to see the comment, right? We don't see the comment yet, of course, because we are not displaying that comment on the show page. And the way we can do that is real quick. We want to say something like, if this article that we are dealing with at this point, in this case the Rails 5 article, if this article has any comments, right, then we are iterating, and we will iterate over those comments. And so we're just going to say article dot each, and I'm going to store it in a comment, and then I'm going to display a comment saying p comment, and what is it? It's content, right? I want to show the content of the comment, right? So if we have any articles, then we iterate over them and we display them, right? Underneath or above the form, it doesn't matter to me. I don't have a lo-fi to follow, but probably we will, in a real setting, we will get some sort of a UI or UX design. In this case, I'm just going to put it underneath the comment. The only thing I'm interested in is to make the functionality there, and then of course you can play around with making it look good or something. Right, now we get an undefined method comments on the page. It's a syntax error, and the reason for that is because we set the comment to belong to an article, but we never set that an article has many comments. You understand? We just made the association one way, which is perfectly fine. The foreign key is there, but we do not have an instance method called comments for that particular article, right? So in order to fix that, we need to abandon Cucumber for a while, and we need to go down to our article spec, and we need to say that we need to describe associations and do, and we need to use the issue the matcher. It is expected to have many comments. So when I wrote the spec for belong to, I was saying, like in English, it is expected to belong to article. That's in singular. And now if I'm writing the should matcher, to check if it has many, I say it's expected to have many comments in plural, right? That's pretty logical, I think. So let's run this. So we just do where we can clear. We just do RSpec. Jesus Christ. Spec models article spec, and it's going to fail for us, right? We expected article to have a has many association called comments, but there was no such association. So we fixed that by going over to the article model and say has many comments, right? So now we run this, and it passes for us, right? Meaning that if we just go back to the Cucumber we were running before, that should also pass. Right. And now we see that comment being displayed. and we still see the form. Of course, styling wise, this sucks big time, because perhaps we should have something like leave a comment here, and then previous comments and stuff like that, basically, right? So in this scenario, what we could add is, of course, I should also see, and I should see something else, like I should see the email thing, right? So I want to see random, something like this, commented by, something like that, right? So who left the comment, right? And of course, this will fail for us if we run this now. And the way we fix it is by going into the view. We are in the presentation layer now. So we go into the view, and we say and we do something like that, commented by, and then comment email, right? Comment email, and we string interpolate that, right? Of course, the English sucks a little bit, but you catch the drift. There we go, right? And now we can see stuff here, basically, right? So if we had more stuff, then it will, of course, be visible to us. Now, so now I have a form, and I have a conditional that if there are any comments, then of course I could do something like this, else. Is it on this one, or no? I think I need to do it here. Else, you just do H1 or H4. There are no comments, right? There are, be the first one, be the first one to comment, right? But then we would need to have another feature file for this, right? Or the first another scenario for this, or something, right? But it's not necessary for now, I would say. However, let us just commit by running rake. Now we just want to make sure that our RSpecs and our cucumbers are passing. Hopefully they are. And it all looks good. What we need to do now is, of course, to remove this show me the page. We don't need that anymore. And then we can just do git add this, git ci all scenarios and specs green. This is a really shitty commit message, so don't mimic me on that one. But yeah, okay. So just some thought here. We will not move on beyond this. There are certain things that we could definitely use here that are of a technical nature, but also from a user experience nature, right? We could run some other scenarios, and what could that be? Like, user fails to submit made content of comment, right? That could be a scenario. What other scenario could be right? Could you come up with any examples? Something like this. Another scenario could be user opts out from submitting email, right? That could also be a scenario. Do we have something else? No, nothing. Well, let's stick to that. And of course, these scenarios need to be filled with some steps, and you have to work your way through those things, and make sure they pass, basically, right? And of course, that will reflect on your, like, what is a valid email? Well, we probably want to check that in our spec. What, if the validation of a format is there, and if he opts out from submitting an email, well, the thing that Alfred spoke about in Scrum this morning, about allowing a blank version, a blank value, right? So you want to validate the format of an email, that it's actually an email if there is an email submitted, right? And if he fails to provide some content into the comment, then you want to see something like, content can't be blank, or something like that. All of this stuff needs to be tested. But that's basically how you build features like this. It's step by step, solving problems, understanding where you are in the stack. Are you on the presentation layer, controller, or logical layer, or the data layer, and keep on shifting from RSpec to Cucumber and vice versa. All right, comments on this, Lisa?
No, not really.
Was it valuable for you to go over it this way, or have we wasted the entire förmiddag, som vi säger på svenska?
No, not at all. I was hoping for this morning, so thumbs up.
Good stuff. Do you feel confident that you can start working with this process, like slowly working your way through each layer and the entire stack?
I feel more confident.
Good. Maritza, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a very good flow. It makes sense to kind of follow it, and I think it helps you to, like you say, just to build from step to step. So yeah, just need to practice and get it into a habit.
All right. Oliver?
Yeah, very good to see everything. I have a quick question. In the what is it? The comments controller.
Right.
When I did it, I did this like comments dot save, because like with the comment create, I equal that to a variable, and then I did.
So I'm gonna stop you there. So the comment create action, or the create action on any action on any active record class, an enhanced class, the create action does two things. It calls the new, and then save on it.
Okay, because I only have new. Okay.
Yeah. No, you have both new and save.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. But I don't have create. I have new.
Yeah.
Okay, then I understand.
Yeah. So the reason why I use create here, because I don't have an error handler, no fallback if there is an error going on. Complete the next scenario that we were dealing with, like if the user fails to submit a content, then I would change this to new. All right, and then I would do something like if well, actually I would do something like this: comment equals. I would then save it in a variable, and then I would say if comment dot save, right? Then I would flash this, right? And else I would flash something else. You understand? And then redirect back to the article path anyway.
Okay.
So
yes.
This is what this is referred to is an error handler. You understand? Like we are exposing errors on the model, but we need the controller to know what to do in various scenarios, right? But since I never got that far, I was not thinking about it because that is premature optimization. I would like, and there's an urge in all of us saying that if I know that I will do this anyway, I might as well do it from the beginning. But that's actually a mistake. I would say that write the least amount of code to make your test pass, and this this thing that I had here, it actually made my test pass. And that's why it's important. This is the code I want at this point. If I start by building other scenarios and I want to expose those errors and stuff like that, then I start adding that functionality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because yeah, thank you. Because I wanted the difference between create and new.
Right, right. Okay, Alfred, was this valuable?
Yeah, it was good to see you know, the flow and see what you did, how mine would the solution would differ from yours. And
right.
Like
right.
some different small stuff.
Right. Good stuff. And so again, there's shitload of conventions and stuff like that. For instance, if I would to do a code review on this one, I would definitely strike down on this fact that just out of the box scaffolding a lot of routes. We don't need that. Like for instance, here on the comments, we would say just only create, right? Because we only need the create route. We don't need all the other routes that are created for the comments just by using the resources. And on the article controller, what do we have? Well, we have the index and show. So I would definitely say only index and show, like this, and hard brackets, not closure brackets, right? And now if I do Rails routes, I don't have that many routes to consider, basically, right? So you see, the only thing we have a comment create, and we have the route path and then stuff. So our routes table is automatically smaller, and only dealing with the things that we are actually using. And of course, it's not only for readability, but if you have those routes generated, then somebody can access those routes and exploit them if there are no controller actions. You know, so it's just a prudent thing to do, I would say. All right, guys, there are shitloads of stuff I can say more about this, but now we spent a few hours dealing with this, and you know, just follow. Yeah, I hope you followed along on a conceptual level. And tonight, when you have a moment, you can implement some of this stuff, because I really want you to have completed this Commons challenge. And one final thought I want to send off with you is that this is as hard as it gets. Displaying the first thing, like just the articles, is pretty easy. You know, you still need to understand where you are in the stack. But here we are doing something fairly complex. We are associating those new objects with a previously created object, like a comment is associated with an article. And if you practice this, and you can get this right and make this happen, then all the other stuff we do in web-based applications are just variants of this. It's just like, yeah, we get some data from the user, we want to create some objects, or, you know, modify some objects and stuff like that. And in your controller actions, you want to do certain things, and then just render something back to the user, and give him some feedback. And it can be much more complex, but it actually follows the same pattern. The pattern is very repetitive. There needs to be a URL, there needs to be a controller, there needs to be a view, and we need to get the data from somewhere, whether it's a database, if it's an API, we use a service, if it's a YAML file, we read that YAML file, etc. Right? But basically, it's just the same thing over and over again. Define the URL, do a request. Is it a post? Is it a GET, PUT request, and stuff like that? You know, and if you can grasp this, you can build virtually 80% of the stuff you can come up with, and that's a pretty amazing thing. All right. And then there will be always like super duper heavy algorithms or some corner case situations where you will find yourself in a very bad position and stuff like that. But also there are also use cases where Rails is not good enough, or does not provide enough functionality. But with this cycle, with this approach, you can build approximately 80% of all the problems sets that you can encounter in web-based applications. All right, peace out, people. Go and have lunch.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.